Hey, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. This is our third event, and we're really excited about the topic tonight. So welcome to Funding Civil Justice. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Nicole Braddock. I'm the CEO of Theory and Principle. We're a design and development agency that builds custom justice and legal technology. And if you've been to any of our events over the last year, welcome back. And if not, we've been hosting these casual virtual events quarterly with a focus on bringing together groups of people that don't normally talk to each other, so like civic tech and legal tech. And today's event is focused on bringing funders and the civil justice community together. So we've found that there's a lot of appetite amongst VCs, foundations, and corporate CSR programs to fund criminal justice efforts, which is fantastic. But there tends to be less focus and less of an understanding on civil justice. So we're here today to help educate and encourage conversations around civil justice and the needs and opportunities that exist there. We have awesome speakers today. We have, again, joining us, the wonderful Sid Harrell, a civic design consultant and the author of a Civil Technologist Practice Guide. She's going to help me with the introduction to civil justice innovation. And then we have Nyra Jordan, the Social Impact Investment Director at AmFam Institute. Felicity Conrad, who is just about to have a baby, so we're really glad she's still with us, the founder and CEO of Paladin, and Erica Rickard, the Project Director of the Civil Legal System Modernization at Pew Charitable Trusts. That was a mouthful. Before I do a quick intro to the topic at hand today, just a few notes on this platform. We love Remo. It's designed to allow for networking. So between the talks, you'll get a break to chat with your fellow attendees. The tables will some tables that have different topics that you can see and move around to tables of interest. Some don't. You can talk about whatever you want. If you want to have more private conversations, you can move to a smaller side table. And a couple other things to note. We have a general, you're welcome to ghost permission here for our events, which means, if you are in a conversation but you want to move to another table, just leave. You don't have to worry about seeming rude and saying goodbye. So ghost permission given. And then for introverts or those who are just tired of virtual conferences, because I know there have been a jillion, you can just move to a side table and turn your mic and camera off, and then you don't have to chat with anybody. All right. Now on to what the hell is civil justice. If there are any questions about the conference, you can feel free to pop them in the chat. But when we talk about the civil justice system, it really encompasses everything that's not criminal. And just to note, I know that there's a lot of people here who are familiar with all the things I'm about to tell you, but the goal here is really to educate people who may not know about the opportunities. So bear with me just a moment while I give some sort of background information. So here specifically, when we're speaking about low and middle income Americans, the civil justice system, the most common issues are things like housing and employment, family law, consumer debt, bankruptcy issues, that sort of thing. And so one of the most fundamental distinctions to understand at the outset is that while criminal defendants have a right to counsel, there is no right to counsel in civil matters. So for example, if you're getting evicted, you're on your own to either represent yourself, pay for a lawyer, or try to find a pro bono attorney. There's a lot of discussion around the country about what's called civil Gideon, after the famous case Gideon versus Wainwright, which is the case that gave criminal defendants the right to counsel. It's not very widespread, though. Some states have implemented modest versions, like in New York, for example, eviction defendants actually have a civil right to counsel, and in a couple of other states. So no right to counsel in civil. It's a big major distinction. And the other thing about civil justice issues is that they are exceedingly common. So Rebecca Sandifer, in an article earlier this year, reviewed World Justice Project data and noted, for example, a typical woman in midlife, definitely not me, definitely not midlife, can expect to be experiencing civil justice problems for over half of her remaining years. Thanks for the correction. It's New York City has the right to counsel for eviction. Apologize for that. That's definitely what I meant. LSC's Justice Gap report from 2017, which is cited a lot, which focused on low-income Americans. And of those, they noted that 71% experienced at least one civil justice issue in the last year, in 2016. And of those people, only 2.8% received meaningful legal support. Another little fact for you guys to know is that it's estimated that over 75% of civil cases across the country have at least one self-represented litigant, so somebody who is there without an attorney. So the issues that we're talking about are overwhelmingly present in our day-to-day lives, yet the system offers very few ways to navigate them. And the kind of issues that these citizens are facing are precisely the kinds of issues that perpetuate the cycle of poverty and our societal inequality. And I know that a lot of people who are on this call right now are funding or interested in funding projects that focus on issues like gender parity, like racial inequality. And my message today is that I think there's truly no better place to start than with civil justice. So in the US and elsewhere too, but we're focusing on the US today, we have this massive gulf between people experiencing issues and their ability to resolve those issues. And clearly there's need for massive policy change, not discounting that. But I think that you can start to see not just the opportunities for innovation to help support these individuals, but the societal imperative. Innovation in this space, including work that we at Theory and Principle do, can help people to do things like better understand legal rights and responsibilities, identify civil legal issues and opportunities, help them to self-advocate, navigate government and court processes, connect to resources that can help them, et cetera. So to elaborate on this further and these opportunities, I'm going to pass it over to Sid to discuss the role technology plays in all of this. Sid, hop on up.
Hi, everyone. I'm going to throw up just a few very quick slides, and much. I've been involved in several of these events with Theory and Principle and really appreciate their hosting. So I am a civic technologist who's been working with executive branch agencies at the federal, local, and state level for some time, and more recently started working in the court system, primarily as a consultant working with the California court system. I want to say up front, I am not a lawyer. This was an extraordinarily important acronym during my federal service, but it's also important here. A lot of you know much more about the law than I do, but I think my perspective as someone who has been leveling up while trying to make technology work better for lay people may be interesting. Justice tech is what this space is often called, also legal innovation, legal tech, access to justice. Some of the types of projects you might see in trying to help people navigate this: taxonomies of referral to organizations that offer legal aid or advocacy, auto expungement for criminal justice matters, that's outside the civil justice system, but often people come to the same parts of the court system, court assistance mechanisms to get help with expungement. Court date reminders are a simple thing that a number of groups try to build just because having a warrant is something that can involve someone in the criminal justice system. Court date reminders in civil justice can help cases keep moving. So if you miss that court date for your eviction, it may be catastrophic. If you miss that court date for your divorce, you may be disadvantaged in how the settlement shakes out, or it may just take way longer and slow the court down as well as your own process for that to get completed and all the way rendered to a signed judgment. Projects around court data are really important, and so are interfaces for the self-represented litigants that Nicole was talking about. Document assembly is a tool that you'll hear a lot, and I know this is something else that a lot of you are probably involved in. This helps people fill out court forms and court paperwork in easier ways, and it's a whole constellation of technologies to do that. So building a little bit on what Nicole said, just in the California courts, courts are pretty federated, of course. Judicial independence leads to and means in many states a certain amount of administrative independence in terms of what technology is chosen and how a court chooses to present itself to the public. And especially during COVID, we've seen a lot of courts innovate in the way that they interact with members of the public and parties before the court. Remote hearings are more common, remote assistance is more common. Innovative ways to file paperwork and interact with the court are happening, but they're happening in a federated way. Again, this is a large state, but just one state. So multiply that across the country. California very much tracks what Nicole said about the number of civil cases that have at least one side with no attorney. It can be especially challenging when that one side is going up against an attorney. So that can happen in lawsuits, in eviction, in family law cases. In a lot of spaces, you get this potential inequity in how well people are represented because someone can't afford or chooses not to access an attorney. From some research we did a few years ago, this is a very small encapsulation of the experience of looking to get help and going to court without a lawyer. There are a lot of signs, a lot of instructions. Most of them are often not that friendly feeling if you're unfamiliar. Whereas at the back of the house, we see tons of organization. But one thing you'll notice, there's a lot of paper. Paper is still a form of default in much of this system. In California, the Judicial Council has about 1,200 standardized forms for doing different actions with the courts. And those are part of the rules of court. So they are either required or courts are required to accept them. They often look like this. This is a petition for parentage, a very common civil action. And you can see that it's not a modern form design. You can probably start imagining immediately how a web form might be more accessible in some ways. But one of the interesting things and why document assembly is such a key tool is that the court requires this actual form as such to be filled out. So tools that ask people for the right responses in an easier way and then fill out the form for them are something that's been really valuable so far. There is a commercial and nonprofit ecosystem around that, and I think a healthy amount of competition to do it well. It's an interesting area. One thing you should know, if you're sort of a tech person, is that typically what actually gets filed in the court management system is the document object itself as a PDF, rather than the data elements that you might think of filling out this form. For us in California, systems are not standardized statewide. Courts can choose their own court management systems, web properties, all of that. There are some big players like Tyler Tech in court management systems, but there is not one dominant player, I don't think, in the US. Just to recap, the kinds of things that get handled in civil justice, some of them are really life impacting. If you need a restraining order, that's actually a civil justice matter. Eviction and housing, child custody and guardianship. And here I start guardianship because every lawyer on this call is probably saying, wait, those aren't part of the same area of law. As a layperson, they sound to me like they go together. But if you're a fellow layperson, child custody is actually part of family law. Guardianship is actually part of probate law. And in many courts, those are handled by different structures, different head judges, different forms, different processes. So there's a bunch of work that happens just making the legal system legible to parties who aren't legal professionals, and making parties who aren't legal professionals legible to the system. And Marcia just put in a comment saying that reinstating a driver's license, if it's been taken as a penalty, is also a civil justice matter. So that's a great point. When people have difficulty navigating courts, of course, it affects equity in outcomes and access for people to the remedies that the law offers them. But it also affects the efficient operation of the courts. When we hear about court backlogs, one part of what we may be hearing about is that people didn't make it to court because they didn't remember their court date, or they didn't serve the other party correctly, and therefore their court case had to be continued until that could be accomplished. So there's a lot of leverage in making courts easier for self-represented litigants to work with and to pursue their rights as constituents of a particular place via the court system. Note about data. I think this is true, and I think Erica will be able to talk about it more when she talks later about Pew's work on court modernization, but we have data on cases and their disposition in California, but we don't have the kind of data you might expect if you work with tech companies in general. So we don't have the data that can say, this is a sticking point in the process where a lot of people fall out. In some ways, that's really good, right? A court case is not a conversion funnel and should not be a conversion funnel, but it would be really useful for people to figure out. A lot of people seem to fall out at the service step after filing papers. How can we make that step easier and make sure that those people falling out are falling out because they've decided not to pursue the case and not because they messed up the procedure? Right now, that's not very clear at all. If you look around the system, you'll find some engineering positions. You'll find relatively few designer product management positions compared to what you might be used to in industry or if you work in executive branch civic tech. And I think that those mechanisms are sometimes underused and potentially really valuable for what needs to be built and enabled for people to be able to interact with the system more easily. I learned a lot of new words, so let me just throw a few of them at you today. Again, a lot of you will find these familiar, but a lot of you may not. From access to justice to e-filing, to the one that for me is interesting, self-help typically means effectively legal aid provided by the court. Unlike legal aid, it's not usually income tested. It's available to everyone. And it is, in fact, getting help from someone, but it's getting help from someone who isn't your attorney, and that's a really important distinction. Self-help centers in courts can assist both sides of the same case. They cannot give legal advice as such. They can give legal information, and that's a big that's been created to help self-represented litigants navigate court processes and thereby help courts operate with reasonable speed and fairly as the level of people representing themselves has grown and grown. So the question is, where in this set of problems to invest effort? And I think that that is going to be a very, very interesting discussion today, and I'm excited you're all here to talk about it. So with that, Nicole, is there anything else people need to know?
And I see Erica giving a shout out for talking more about opening up court data to know what's happening. And I think that's something that all of us yearn for who work in this space. And I know she at least signed up. I don't know if she's here. Tanina Ross-Dane from Georgetown Law, I think, is here. And she's a great person to chat with about that if you're going around the tables and want to talk more about what's happening with court data. Thanks so much, Sid, for that welcome. And now I will invite Nyra Jordan up on stage. I'm really happy to have Nyra here today. As I mentioned at the outset, she's the Social Impact Investment Director at AmFam Institute. In April, they partnered with PE firm Village Capital to release a report entitled Justice Tech for All: How Technology Can Ethically Disrupt the US Justice System. I'll pop a link in the chat window about it. And that covers the landscape of justice technology and funding in the space, which she'll be talking about today. So thanks so much, Nyra, for being here, and off you go.
Thank you so much for having me. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can share my screen here. Are you all seeing a slide deck here?
Looks great, Nyra.
Perfect. Thank you for that feedback. So I am Nyra Jordan. I'm with the American Family Insurance Institute for Corporate and Social Impact, located here in Madison, Wisconsin. And I'm going to give a little bit about the American Family Insurance Institute and what we do. And then I'm going to talk a little bit more about the Justice Tech Market Assessment that was just highlighted and shared. And I'll get into a few of those findings, and I'll talk a little bit about next steps related to that. So the Institute launched in 2018 as a social impact hub that really believes that innovation and proximity are powerful tools to drive change within our society. And our mission is to close equity gaps across America. And within that mission, we are investing and partnering in communities all over the country. As you can see, we have 4 priority areas. And this is when we think about partnerships and investments that we make across the country, these are the areas of focus that we look at. And so we're always looking at and asking the question when we're considering investment, do they align to any one of these areas? and what is that equity gap within that space that it's closing. And so American Family has made a commitment to advocate for economic equity for individuals impacted by the justice system, both criminal and under the priority area of economic empowerment and criminal justice reform. And so within this space, we have formed partnerships within the community to build capacity with advocates and experts that are working tirelessly and working really closely with individuals and families that have been impacted by the criminal and civil justice system. And we've also made investments in high impact startups within the area of justice tech, which you just heard about. All right, let me get this to work. I'm new, forgive me. There we go. So within our VC activity, we've made 2 early stage investments in what is referred to as justice tech, which I'll provide a definition, at least the definition that we used within our market assessment. I'll share that with you in a little bit. Pigeonly was our first investment in this category. It is a communications platform that helps families stay connected during incarceration. And Felicity and our friends at Paladin, who you're going to hear from shortly, is an investment we made last year, which provides access to justice for low-income individuals in need of legal aid or support. And we will continue to invest in justice tech because we believe that tech that can create opportunities and help reduce inequities in the criminal and civil justice system, but only that it works and it's important, but only if it follows one important principle. And it's something that we use as we think about how we want to make our investments. It has to be designed by, with, and for people with direct experience in the system, or those who have dedicated their lives to criminal and civil justice change. So the market assessment. In September of last year, Village Capital and our institute convened a summit on justice tech to discuss how to move forward in convening and redefining criminal and civil justice tech from an ethical, human-centered perspective. And the summit was a chance for us to listen to our Justice Tech Advisory Board, which was made up of a group of experts and with a strong perspective on technology and the justice system. Our assessment was really informed and inspired by that summit, as well as more than 150 hours of additional interviews that took place throughout last year and meetings with our advisory board members and entrepreneurs. And the perspectives of justice-involved people are central to this report. So are the perspective of those who have dedicated decades to criminal and civil justice change. So we were very fortunate to have our partnership with Village Capital featured in Forbes, and we see that as an opportunity for venture capital investors, both impact and traditional alike, to coalesce around this idea of justice tech as an important area to support historically excluded and overlooked people in the US. And it's an area of promising return on investment that's built on scalable technology. And so our final market assessment was released just last month. And so I'm going to dive into a little bit of those findings around this assessment. So this is the definition that I talked about, just the level set to define what we were talking about in this assessment when we speak about justice tech. And we looked at several definitions from different groups, different communities. And so we offer the following definition that we believe encompasses both the criminal and civil justice system and also recognizes that justice tech can disrupt the system from the moment of an initial interaction with law enforcement through reentry to the community after incarceration. So that entire cycle. Justice tech, we know, is a growing space, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to build the ecosystem of ethical justice tech. And in this report, we share recommendations from entrepreneurs and investors and corporations on how they are looking to help build this community. And so one of the things we found in the report, one of the key findings was that justice tech startups fall across a variety of tech sectors. And we actually identified 6 through our research. And so I'll describe these very briefly here for you. Financial help, which involves, helps people that have been involved in the justice system and their families achieve financial security and stability and the ability to thrive. There's a future of work that expands access to education and employment for justice-involved people. You have government tech that makes government systems like courts more accessible or efficient. There's healthcare technology that supports the mental and physical health of currently and formerly incarcerated people. We have communications that helps justice involved people stay connected with family and friends and service providers from arrest through reentry. And then there's legal tech that expands access to both civil and legal resources and criminal legal representation after arrest. So as you can see, justice tech is a fragmented investment market. There are a few investors with a deeper understanding of the challenges and opportunities within justice tech, but the majority of early stage VCs and impact investors need spaces of conversation and learning to identify actually where they fit along this, harm reduction to a divestment spectrum, and what their role can be within this process. And so what were some of the challenges? So when we think about justice tech and these associated sectors, we asked our advisory board about the biggest challenges as well as the opportunities that exist in solving them. So some of the challenges that they identified include market awareness. Capital formation is one of the biggest challenges in the justice tech space. Those involved in the system of funding startups, including impact investors, have to begin or continue their journey towards being intersectional justice tech startups, in particular those that are led by BIPOC or LGBTQ founders with direct and proximate experience in the system, face compounding biases and barriers due to the lack of understanding. In addition, we heard from stakeholders that impact investors often talk about what they are investing in, but we don't often talk about, how those investments are made. So we believe that the systems that govern that capital, those innovations received, should also be operated and led by and with and for people with direct lived experience within the criminal and civil justice system, and those who are working in this space and have dedicated their lives and careers to this space. And then finally, cross-sector collaboration will be necessary to drive any real and meaningful, long-lasting, sustainable change. Advocacy groups and nonprofits working with communities affected by justice systems are often not invited to sit at the table where technology is designed and, or when investment decisions are made even. And so often when they are invited, it's at the back end of a process when key decisions have already been made. So this report recommends that investors also engage in research to understand the stakeholders in their market and to support the most impactful innovations. So those are some of the challenges we found in the report. Now, what are the opportunities that exist as we think about this? So, it will be important for corporate CSR programs and investment funds to understand where your organization currently stands on this issue of criminal and civil justice. I will say personally, within American Family, this was a conversation we had to have as we started to make the decision that we were going to step out in this space from not just an investment standpoint and thinking about the criminal and civil justice system, but also looking internally at some of our processes. We had to understand what our beliefs were and where our positions were in this space. So we encourage other companies to identify impact and return on investment goals around justice tech and create alignment across corporate units, from venture arms to foundations, from innovation to strategy and corporate social responsibility teams. Internally, this work is aligned to our business strategy, and it's not separate from the work of American Family Insurance. It is critical, we believe, as part of our community investment as well as around our business results. Next, corporate innovation and strategy leaders also have a unique position from which to build early relationships with B2B justice tech startups and become early pilot testers for their solutions. And so we also encourage you to test solutions directly and help entrepreneurs to refine their systems and their solutions. Leaders can also help entrepreneurs build early traction to validate and bring on seed stage investors and drive capital towards justice tech entrepreneurs. And then finally, that cross-sector collaboration that I talked about, that I said was so necessary. Similar to how corporations collaborate with accelerators and incubators, corporate leaders can fund and build partnerships with emerging accelerators and incubators, which explicitly source and support justice tech startups. Beyond the tech sector, we also encourage you to build partnerships with transitional support nonprofits for justice-involved people and to join and participate in community events, advisory boards, campaigns, and pledges led by activists and grassroots organizers. So what's next for us when we think about this space? Justice tech startups are seeking to raise approximately $10 to $15 million in venture capital this year. So now is the time to support and invest in entrepreneurs who are creating opportunities for people impacted by the criminal and civil justice system. The Criminal and Civil Justice Tech Project is a part of our vision and work. The AmFam Institute believes that we must move forward and approach criminal and civil justice tech from an ethical, human-centered perspective in a couple of fundamental ways. First of all, because of a lack of common definition on what in justice tech, investors have an opportunity to better uplift and support justice tech entrepreneurs currently dealing with a fragmented and divided funding ecosystem. That's why we are continuing our collaboration with Village Capital by convening early stage justice tech investors in what we're calling an investor coalition. And we're going to also bring along traditional investors as well as impact investors that are interested in a new way of emerging impact in this field and a new way to invest their capital. Our longer term vision is to catalyze more capital into justice tech entrepreneurs. And finally, we will continue our internal work in fair chance hiring and looking at our processes as an organization. And we will seek out partners that are also willing to step into this space. And we will continue to amplify our partnerships with justice involved people and organizations that are proximate to this issue. And so that is what I wanted to share today. And so I thank you for the opportunity and the time to present this work with American Family and to share our partnership with Village Capital. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Nyra. I think your program is incredible, and I hope it can serve as a model to other corporations that are interested in similar activities. So thanks so much for sharing. So we're running a little bit over. We're going to go and do a little bit of chit-chatting, and I'll bring you guys back at 1:45 to hear from Felicity. Thanks so much.